Welcome to the string shop again for the next installment of how to build a fiddle. We're up to part 11, if you can believe it. In the last video, we actually did complete our fiddle. We installed the pegs and the nut and the saddle. I've got my button here in place. And the only thing remaining before we set this up and actually play it is I'd like to put a finish on her. So what I'm doing today is experimenting with some finishes that we can use on our fiddle. And let me show you what I'm doing and what some options are for you. Because we are building a fiddle and not a prissy violin that has to look like everybody else's on the entire planet, we don't care what other people think about what finish we use on our instrument. All over the internet, you will find guys mixing up secret potions like a mad scientist, and they have their secret varnish recipe that no one can know about, or they'll sell it to you for $100 for 2 fluid ounces. Dr. Carleen Hutchins did extensive research on the impact of finishes on violin plates. And do you know what she discovered? After years of research, she recommended good old Spar Varnish. Now let me tell you something. Open up your brain for a second. When you're going to bake a cake, what do you use to bake a cake? Basic ingredients like flour, water, and egg, a leavening agent like baking soda or baking powder, sugar, and then what are the alternates? Color, flavor, maybe a little the texture. Varnish is the same way. It must be made out of the same ingredients in the same proportions, or it's not varnish and it won't work. And the only thing you can change are very minute details about the varnish, and it certainly will not affect the acoustic properties of the finish. The other traditional finish, which I love, it's organic, it's non-toxic, is shellac. It's easy to apply. It is second to none in the way it refracts light. But you choose what you want to do. Let me show you my little experiment now that I'm done ranting. Just so you know, International Violin sells some excellent finishes. $112 for this nice little varnish kit. Or maybe you just want to spend $38 for a little tiny bottle of balsamic oil varnish. These will work great. As you know, my fiddle is made out of cherry, and there is no way I want to make that any darker than it already is, but I would like to darken up the top plate. I'm experimenting today with different finishes for my fiddle. Way over here on the left, on this sample piece of spruce, I have 1 coat of garnet shellac, homemade, 1 coat of amber, just so you can see the color, and it's beautiful. This is my control. This piece is just 1 coat of plain varnish. Now I've started coloring my varnish using a little bit of this Minwax wood finish in their cherry stain, because the back of my fiddle is made out of cherry. I'm about to color some using artist's pigment, and I wanted you to be able to follow along. In my little mixing cup is 2 fluid ounces of Spar Varnish. I'm using a little bit of this Da Vinci Venetian Red, and I've put a blob about the size of a small pea in this little cap, and I'm going to dilute it with a thinner and then add it to my varnish. Now I'm just dissolving my little pea-sized blob in this thinner so I can add it to my varnish. Sorry about the crazy rant. Violin world can be a little oppressive at times. Nobody ever criticizes a guitar maker about what finish they applied. I'll just stir it in and we'll sample it. Alright, I finished mixing, and I'm just going to apply just a little bit of this to the plain spruce. The bottom of the board I'm holding has some of that cherry stain lightly rubbed into it. Let that dry, and I am going to do at least 2 coats before we make a final judgment. I'd like to make one more comment regarding finishes for your fiddle before I show you the results of my experiments. Someone's going to ask, what about polyurethane? Half you guys probably have it on the shelf somewhere, or this was the very first thing you saw when you went looking for finishes for wood. Polyurethane is the most common. It's a urethane. It's basically liquefied plastic. It's cheap. It's easy to use. It dries quick. It's a little bit brittle. Let me contrast it with Spar Varnish. Yes, I know, Minwax changed the label and added the word urethane. Well, they added a urethane additive to their Spar Varnish to make it even more durable. It's still good old Spar Varnish made with tung oil. It still forms a long chain molecule as it polymerizes. Well, where did Spar Varnish come from anyway? Well, back in the day, when the majestic sailing ships ruled the seas, they needed something to protect the spars on the masts from the elements. In comes Spar Varnish. And that is probably where the old masters got the idea for the finish on their violins. It was commonly available, and through the massive shipping industry, it had been perfected. It allows the wood to expand and contract with the changes in the humidity. So it's fairly flexible, and that's what makes it great for our instruments, which are constantly vibrating. I also mentioned shellac. Shellac is a wonderful finish. It's also a little bit brittle, like polyurethane, but it's all natural, non-toxic, wonderful to use, and you can buy flakes and mix your own really easily. There's one finish that I did not mention to you yet, and I want to, and it's this one right here. Let me introduce you to tried and true wood finish. It's a polymerized linseed oil with beeswax. It's non-toxic. It smells wonderful. It's made by a man who's a violinist and has his own line of violin varnishes. Here's a little peek at his website, triedandtruewoodfinish.com. It looks like honey. Mmm, delicious. If you love all natural stuff, if you're working indoors, if your wife's pregnant, and you can't be making all kinds of nasty fumes, you would love this stuff. I did one fiddle with it, and it came out really nice. Once this kind of cures, you buff it out, and you get a real nice, I would say, satin sheen to the wood. It's real pretty. And a little goes a long way. This can will last me the rest of my life. And I'm just going to show you the color change on the wood and encourage you to at least look into it. I'm not going to use it on this fiddle, but I have used it and I really liked it. Here's a little oak, spruce, and cherry, so you can see the rich color it brings out of the wood. Are you ready for the results of my experiments? Well, here's a look at my experiments. This is my cherry with one coat of varnish on it. Lovely color. My number one priority is to complement this color here. Now down on this end is my shellacs. The second criteria is, can I see through the finish? can I still see the grain of the wood shimmer in the light? And the answer is yes with the shellac. But I have to tell you, I don't think the colors go. So I eliminate the shellac from my selection. Now what do I have left? Well, right here, I tried applying the stain directly to the spruce. I like the color, but I don't like the effect of how the stain gets caught in the grain. So I eliminate that one. This is plain spruce with 1 coat of varnish on it. This is the stain mixed at 48:1. Virtually no color change. This is 24:1. Pretty much the same thing. I eliminate these 3. All these pieces have 2 coats. This is the varnish I mixed with the artist pigment. Now all I had was that red, and this came out much too pink for my liking. But used carefully, it still meets the criteria of letting you see the beautiful grain through the finish. But I have to eliminate this guy because of the color. Now these are my last 3 contestants, and I didn't know how much stain I could add to my varnish, really. I actually did a few more experiments than you see here. This is 2 coats of 24:1 with the stain. You can see the grain shimmer nicely, but it's too light. These are my last 2 contestants. This was 6:1, this was mixed 3:1, and from what I've read, you can go as much as 1:1 on mixing your stain with your varnish. So this guy is my winner for this little experiment. I think it will be a nice complement to the color of the back and sides. I didn't want to add any more pigment to my varnish because I want to see the grain in there still shimmer and move with the light. Now obviously, if you want to try your own experiments, Minwax has a range of colors in their little cans of varnish, and you can try it. It's not hard to color or tint or varnish. You just must be careful, because the more color you add, the more opaque it becomes, to the point where you might not even see the grain if you get carried away. Well, I'm going to move on to the fiddle here and prep it for its first coat, which will be clear spar varnish. Before I strip the violin, I always label my pegs so they can go back in the same place. And I put all my parts in a little Ziploc bag. Now I'm going to pop off this fingerboard. I'm going to use my slightly modified little paint scraper, and I'm going to insert it right here under the fingerboard and work my way back, and this will just pop off, literally. Easy does it. Gentle. You can hear the crazy cracking. It's kind of unnerving. That little glue joint has released. Now, whoop! Ha-ha! All done. Now that your fiddle is all cleaned up, you can tape off the neck and the nut and the saddle real nice. Make yourself a little fiddle stand out of a dowel rod that you shaped to fit into the buttonhole, like so. Grab a scrap piece of 2x4, drill a corresponding hole, clamp it to your workbench so that you will have a place to set this thing when you're done working. Do yourself a big favor and don't use a 79-cent brush. This costs $6 or $7 and it's really worth it. You can start pretty much wherever you want. I like to start on the sides and then do my scroll and heel and save this neck for last. I'm only going to put a coat of clear on the neck, and then I'll work on my top and my back. I've been looking forward to seeing what the cherry looks like on a fiddle, and I am not being disappointed right now. Ooh, look at that. Crazy good, huh? If you are using shellac, you want to be working really fast. I actually had terrible luck brushing it, and I used a HVLP sprayer, like for doing touch-up work on a car, and it sprayed wonderful. What do you think about that? Pretty. I don't know. This cherry is stunning. I'm having trouble now thinking about coloring this top. I just love the color of the old spruce. Just sanding a little bit between coats. I'm using a little 600 grit wet or dry sandpaper just to knock down the little fibers that have raised themselves up on the first coat of varnish. I'm still a little bit undecided about putting that color coat on the top. It is so beautiful, but I think I'm going to stick with the plan. So a quick once over, and then wipe this down with a clean soft rag to get the dust off, and I'll be ready to apply coat number 2. I don't know if you can see that there's any difference. I can see it here. Sometimes the camera doesn't pick it up well. The biggest thing is not to get streaks. I did those test pieces and I found that the color evened out nicely on its own once you just let it sit for a little bit. That's why I have the violin laying flat. Sorry, it's a fiddle. That was a mistake. I let this rest for a little bit so this would kind of gel up and I wouldn't have the brush strokes. So now I'm just going to work on applying the rest of the clear satin for my second coat on this beautiful, beautiful cherry fiddle. Well, I'm on the home stretch here. And the reason I'm wearing fancy clothes today is because it's my daughter's birthday. We had a little celebration. And now I'm just getting my second coat on before bedtime. I keep using words like beautiful, pleased. But I am in love with this cherry. Sorry for the repetition. Well, that brings this video on how to build a fiddle to a close. The cherry fiddle now has 3 coats of varnish on her. And in fact, she's hiding behind me right now. In the next video, we will set her up with a new bridge and a sound post and strings and everything she needs so we can finally hear her sing. I hope you found this encouraging. Maybe you will experiment with a finish for your fiddle. And please, don't be oppressed by violin world. There are many suitable finishes for your instrument. And you know what? It's going to look great because it's yours. I hope to see you for the next video on how to build a fiddle. This is a little piece of walnut with a red cedar top, also with just a clear spar varnish on it.